The rain poured down in sheets, turning the streets of Chicago into a shimmering maze of reflections. Margaret Harper pulled her coat tighter around herself as she hurried home from another long day at the community shelter. Her boots splashed through puddles and the cold wind bit at her cheeks, but Margaret didn't mind. She had always found comfort in helping others. It gave her life meaning. As she turned a corner, something caught her eye. A faint movement in the shadows of an alleyway. At first she thought it might be a stray cat or maybe just her imagination playing tricks on her tired mind. But then she saw it again. A small figure huddled beneath a tattered blanket pressed against the damp bricks of the building. Margaret hesitated for a moment before stepping closer. The dim light from a nearby street lamp revealed the face of a child not more than 10 years old with wide, frightened eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. "Hello?" Margaret said softly, crouching down so she wouldn't appear too intimidating. "Are you okay?" The boy didn't respond. Immediately. His lips trembled either from fear or the biting cold. He was soaked to the bone, his thin clothes clinging to his frail frame. Margaret noticed how he clutched the edges of the blanket tightly, as if it were his only shield against the harsh world surrounding him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible, muffled by both exhaustion and a language barrier. I don't know where," he stammered in broken English, shaking his head as tears welled up in his eyes. Margaret's heart broke instantly. She reached out slowly, careful not to startle him. "It's all right," she whispered reassuringly. "You're safe now." She introduced herself, repeating her name several times until the boy managed to echo it back weakly. He told her his name was Karim, though pronouncing it took effort. Margaret could tell he was scared, not just of her but of everything. There was a deep sadness etched into his young features, a heaviness no child should ever carry. Karim explained haltingly that he had come to America with his family after fleeing their war-torn country, Syria. They had been separated during the chaotic journey when they arrived in the U.S., and since then he had been wandering alone, unsure of what to do or whom to trust. Margaret listened intently, her throat tightening with every word. She couldn't imagine the horrors this boy must have witnessed. The loss, the confusion, the loneliness. Without hesitation, Margaret decided she couldn't leave him there. The thought of walking away felt impossible. She rummaged through her bag and handed him a granola bar she kept for emergencies. Karim accepted it gratefully, devouring it in seconds. Then, gently but firmly, Margaret extended her hand toward him. "Come with me," she said. "I'll take care of you tonight." For a brief moment, Karim hesitated. His wary eyes searched hers, trying to gauge whether she truly meant what she said. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he placed his tiny hand in hers. It was freezing, almost icy, but Margaret held it tightly, determined to warm it, and perhaps his spirit too. They walked together under the relentless rain, heading toward the community shelter where Margaret volunteered. Along the way, she spoke softly to Karim, telling him about the place they were going. "It's warm there," she promised, "and there are people who will help us figure things out." When they arrived at the shelter, Margaret introduced Karim to the staff, explaining the situation as best she could. Though resources were limited, the team sprang into action, providing him with dry clothes, food, and a bed for the night. Margaret stayed by his side, ensuring he felt safe and cared for. Watching him drift off to sleep, curled up on the cot, she felt a pang of determination settle in her chest. This boy needed stability, love, and someone to believe in him. And Margaret knew she wanted to be that person. That evening, as Margaret lay awake in her own bed, thoughts of Karim filled her mind. She couldn't shake the image of his fragile body shivering in the rain or the haunted look in his eyes. Something inside her stirred, a mix of compassion, responsibility, and maybe even destiny. Little did she know, this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. What began as a simple act of kindness on a rainy night would blossom into a lifelong bond, one rooted in resilience, gratitude, and unconditional love. The days following their first meeting were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions for Margaret. After spending hours at the shelter talking to social workers, she learned that Karim had been officially classified as an unaccompanied minor. His family's whereabouts remained unknown, buried under layers of bureaucracy and international red tape. The idea of leaving him in the system, bouncing from one temporary placement to another, weighed heavily on Margaret's heart. She couldn't bear the thought of him being shuffled around like a forgotten piece of paperwork. So without giving herself too much time to second guess, she made the bold decision to become his foster parent. It wasn't an easy choice. Margaret lived alone in a modest two-bedroom apartment, her salary as a schoolteacher barely stretching to cover her own expenses. Taking in a child meant making sacrifices, financially, emotionally, and practically. But when she looked into Karim's eyes, none of those challenges seemed insurmountable. That same evening, she signed the necessary papers, officially welcoming Karim into her home. For the first time in weeks, maybe even months, Karim slept in a real bed, in a room he could call his own. At first, life with Karim was a delicate balancing act. Communication was a hurdle. Margaret spoke only English, while Karim's grasp of the language was limited. They relied on gestures, pictures, and the few phrases they managed to teach each other. Margaret bought a children's dictionary and started labeling items around the house, or chair, table, window, to help him learn faster. Every night after dinner, they would sit together at the kitchen table practicing words and sentences. Sometimes Karim grew frustrated, tears welling up in his eyes when he couldn't express himself clearly. But Margaret never lost patience. Instead, she'd smile warmly and say, "We'll try again tomorrow." Beyond the language barrier, there were cultural differences to navigate. Margaret quickly realized that food played a significant role in Karim's comfort and identity. She began experimenting with recipes she found online, trying to recreate dishes he might have eaten back in Syria. One Saturday afternoon, she spent hours in the kitchen attempting to make kibbeh, a dish Karim had described using animated hand motions. When she finally served it to him, his face lit up with delight. It was a small victory, but it meant the world to both of them. From then on, cooking became a shared activity, a way for them to bond and bridge the gap between their worlds. School was another challenge. At first, Karim struggled to keep up with his classmates. He often sat quietly in the corner during lessons, unsure of what was being asked or how to participate. Margaret worked tirelessly with his teachers to create a supportive environment. She attended every parent-teacher conference, advocated for extra tutoring sessions, and encouraged Karim to ask questions whenever he didn't understand something. Slowly, but surely, he began to catch up. His natural curiosity and sharp mind shone through, and soon he was excelling in subjects like math and science. Margaret beamed with pride every time she saw his name on the honor roll. But it wasn't just academics where Karim flourished. Over time, he started opening up about his past. Through drawings and fragmented stories, he shared glimpses of his life in Syria, the vibrant markets, the laughter of his siblings, the warmth of his mother's hugs. These memories were bittersweet, tinged with both nostalgia and pain. Margaret listened intently, letting him know it was okay to feel whatever he felt. She encouraged him to write down his thoughts in a journal, which eventually became a cherished keepsake filled with sketches, poems, and reflections. As months turned into years, their relationship deepened. Margaret wasn't just a caregiver. To Karim, she became his anchor, his confidant, and his biggest supporter. In return, Karim brought joy and purpose into her life. He taught her resilience, showing her that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, it was possible to find strength and hope. Their home, once quiet and predictable, now buzzed with energy. Karim filled it with laughter, music, and the occasional chaos of teenage antics. Margaret wouldn't have had it any other way. One particular moment stood out as a turning point in their journey together. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Margaret took Karim to a local park. They walked along the winding paths, leaves crunching beneath their feet. As they reached the top of a hill overlooking the city, Kareem suddenly stopped and turned to her. "Margaret," he said, his voice steady despite the lump forming in his throat. "Thank you for saving me." Margaret blinked back tears, pulling him into a tight hug. "I didn't save you, Kareem," she replied softly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a little help along the way." That conversation marked a shift in Kareem's mindset. He began to see himself not as a victim of circumstance but as someone capable of overcoming adversity. This newfound confidence propelled him forward, fueling his determination to succeed. By the time he entered high school, Kareem had transformed into a bright, ambitious young man with dreams bigger than anyone could have imagined. Through it all, Margaret remained steadfast by his side, cheering him on at every step. She celebrated his victories, consoled him during setbacks, and reminded him daily of his worth. Together, they proved that love and perseverance could transcend barriers of language, culture, and trauma. What started as a random encounter on a rainy night had blossomed into a profound connection, one that would shape the course of both their lives in ways neither of them could have anticipated. As Kareem grew older, his gratitude for Margaret's unwavering support only deepened. He often thought about the sacrifices she had made for him, the late nights helping him with homework, the weekends spent teaching him life skills, and the countless times she put his needs before her own. Her kindness wasn't just a roof over his head or meals on the table. It was the way she believed in him when he doubted himself, the way she encouraged him to dream big even when the odds felt stacked against him. Kareem knew he could never repay her in the traditional sense, but he vowed to honor her by living a life of purpose and giving back to others who faced struggles like he once did. High school became a pivotal chapter in Kareem's journey. By then, he had not only caught up academically, but had also begun to excel. His teachers noticed his sharp intellect and creative problem-solving abilities, especially in subjects like math and physics. But what truly set him apart was his empathy. Kareem had an innate ability to connect with people, particularly those who felt invisible or overlooked. Whether it was tutoring younger students after class or volunteering at the same community shelter, where Margaret had found him years ago, Kareem poured his energy into making a difference. One of the most transformative experiences during this time was his involvement in a mentorship program for refugee children. Many of these kids reminded Kareem of his younger self, lost, scared, and yearning for stability. He remembered how Margaret had patiently taught him English, introduced him to new foods, and helped him navigate unfamiliar customs. Now, he tried to do the same for them. On weekends, he'd organize small group activities, teaching basic phrases in English or sharing stories from his own life. The kids adored him, seeing him as proof that someone could rise above their circumstances and thrive. Margaret watched all of this unfold with immense pride. She loved hearing about Kareem's adventures at school and his growing reputation as a leader among his peers. Yet what touched her most was how he carried himself, with humility and grace. Despite everything he had been through, Kareem never let bitterness take root. Instead, he radiated hope and determination, qualities that inspired everyone around him. When senior year rolled around, the question of college loomed large. Kareem knew he wanted to pursue higher education, but he also understood the financial burden it would place on Margaret. She had already done so much for him, and the idea of asking her to shoulder tuition costs weighed heavily on his mind. Margaret, however, refused to entertain any talk of limitations. "Kareem," she said one evening, as they sat together at the kitchen table, "you've worked too hard to let anything stand in your way. We'll figure it out, together." True to her word, Margaret helped Kareem research scholarships and financial aid options. Together, they filled out applications, wrote essays, and prepared for interviews. Kareem poured his heart into every submission, weaving his personal story into each piece of writing. He spoke candidly about the challenges he had faced as a refugee, the love and guidance he had received from Margaret, and his desire to use his education to uplift others. His authenticity resonated with selection committees, and soon, acceptance letters began pouring in. The moment Karim opened the envelope offering him a full scholarship to study architecture at a prestigious university, tears streamed down his face. He ran to find Margaret, clutching the letter tightly in his hands. "I got in," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with emotion. "And it's paid for. I won't have to worry about money." Margaret hugged him tightly, her own eyes brimming with tears. "You deserve this, Karim," she whispered. "Every bit of it." Choosing architecture as his field of study wasn't a random decision. It stemmed from a deeply personal place. Growing up, Karim had always been fascinated by structures, the way buildings could provide shelter, safety, and a sense of belonging. He thought about the bombed-out homes he had seen in Syria, the makeshift tents in refugee camps, and the cramped apartments where families like his had struggled to rebuild their lives. Architecture, he realized, wasn't just about designing spaces. It was about creating environments that nurtured human dignity and fostered community. During his first semester at college, Karim threw himself into his studies with characteristic passion. He devoured textbooks, attended guest lectures, and spent hours sketching blueprints in the campus studio. But he didn't lose sight of his mission. Whenever possible, he sought out projects that aligned with his values, designing affordable housing solutions, collaborating with nonprofits to build sustainable shelters, and advocating for urban planning policies that prioritized marginalized communities. Margaret remained a constant source of encouragement throughout this period. She visited him on campus whenever she could, bringing homemade meals and cheering him on during presentations. Though she missed having him at home, she marveled at how much he had grown, not just as a student, but as a person. Karim, in turn, made sure to stay connected, calling her regularly and sending letters filled with updates about his classes and friends. Their bond remained as strong as ever, a testament to the foundation they had built together. By the time Karim graduated, he had earned accolades for his innovative designs and commitment to social impact. His thesis project, a model for eco-friendly, low-cost housing tailored to displaced populations, garnered widespread attention. Professors praised his vision, while industry leaders expressed interest in collaborating with him. Offers from top firms flooded in, but Karim had a different plan in mind. He accepted a position with a nonprofit organization dedicated to rebuilding communities affected by conflict and natural disasters. It was less glamorous than working for a corporate firm, and the pay was modest, but Karim didn't care. For him, it was about staying true to his roots and honoring the woman who had given him a second chance at life. As he stood on stage delivering his graduation speech, he looked out into the audience and locked eyes with Margaret. "This journey started with one act of kindness," he said, his voice steady, yet filled with emotion. "Because of that, I learned that love has the power to transform lives, including my own." The crowd erupted in applause, but Karim barely heard it. All he could think about was how far he had come, and how much farther he still wanted to go. With Margaret cheering him on from the sidelines, he felt ready to take on the world. Little did he know his greatest gift to her was yet to come. Years passed, and Karim's career flourished in ways that surpassed even his wildest dreams. His work with the nonprofit organization took him to corners of the globe he had once only read about in books. He traveled to refugee camps, war-torn cities, and disaster-stricken regions, designing homes and community spaces that were not only functional, but also infused with dignity and beauty. Each project became a testament to his vision: architecture as a tool for healing, resilience, and hope. Yet no matter how far his work carried him, Karim never forgot where he came from, or the woman who had changed the course of his life. Margaret, now in her late 60s, continued to live in the same modest apartment she had called home for decades. It was cozy and filled with memories. Photos of Karim at various stages of his life lined the walls, along with artwork he had created during his childhood. But the space was beginning to show its age. The pipes groaned loudly when the water ran, the heater struggled through harsh winters, and the narrow hallways made it increasingly difficult for Margaret to move around comfortably. Still, she refused to complain. To her, the apartment wasn't just four walls. It was a sanctuary where she and Karim had built their lives together. Karim noticed these changes every time he visited. At first, he would gently suggest upgrades or repairs, offering to hire someone to fix the plumbing or replace the worn-out carpet, but Margaret always waved him off with a smile. "This place has served us well," she'd say. "There's no need to spend money on something so old." Deep down, though, Karim knew better. He saw the way she winced when climbing the stairs, or how she bundled herself in extra blankets during chilly nights. Her sacrifices had become second nature to her, but they weighed heavily on him. One evening, after returning from a particularly grueling assignment abroad, Karim sat alone in his small office, staring at blueprints scattered across his desk. His mind drifted to Margaret, to all the times she had put others before herself, quietly enduring hardships without ever asking for recognition. A thought began to form, one that had been simmering in the back of his mind for years. What if he could design a home specifically for her? Not just any house, but a place that reflected everything she loved and everything she stood for. A haven where she could spend her golden years surrounded by warmth and comfort. The idea ignited a fire within him. Over the next several months, Karim poured his heart into creating the perfect design. He imagined every detail with care, drawing inspiration from Margaret's personality and the bond they shared. The house would be nestled in a quiet neighborhood close enough for him to visit often, yet far enough from the noise of the city to offer peace and tranquility. Its exterior would feature soft pastel colors reminiscent of springtime, a nod to Margaret's love for gardening. Inside, the layout would prioritize accessibility, with wide doorways, an open floor plan, and a ground-level bedroom suite equipped with modern amenities to ensure her safety and ease of movement. But Karim didn't stop there. He wanted the home to tell a story, one of gratitude, resilience, and love. In the living room, he envisioned a large bay window overlooking a lush garden, where Margaret could sip her morning tea while watching birds flit between trees. The kitchen would have ample counter space for baking, a hobby she adored, along with shelves displaying cookbooks and family recipes. And in the hallway leading to the bedrooms, he planned to install a gallery wall featuring photographs, drawings, and mementos from their journey together, a visual reminder of how far they had come. As the plans took shape, Karim worked tirelessly to bring them to life. He collaborated with contractors, sourced sustainable materials, and oversaw every aspect of construction. Though the process was demanding, he found joy in each step, knowing that this project was more than just a building. It was a labor of love. On days when stress threatened to overwhelm him, he reminded himself why he was doing it. This house wasn't just for Margaret. It was a tribute to the selflessness and compassion she had shown him when he needed it most. Finally, after nearly a year of hard work, the house was complete. Standing outside on the freshly landscaped lawn, Karim felt a surge of pride and nerves. He had kept the entire project a secret from Margaret, wanting the reveal to be a surprise. Now, as he prepared to share it with her, he couldn't help but wonder how she would react. Would she feel overwhelmed, grateful, or perhaps hesitant to leave the familiarity of her old apartment? On a crisp autumn morning, Karim arrived at Margaret's doorstep with a bouquet of flowers and a nervous smile. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, holding out his hand. Margaret raised an eyebrow, intrigued but suspicious. "What kind of adventure?" she replied, grabbing her coat. "You know I'm too old for surprises," Karim chuckled. "Trust me, you'll like this one." They drove in silence, Margaret glancing out the window curiously as they left the city behind. When they pulled up to the house, her breath caught in her throat. The sight before her was breathtaking, a charming cottage surrounded by vibrant flowers and towering oak trees. Karim stepped out of the car and walked around to open her door. "Welcome home," he said softly, handing her the keys. For a moment, Margaret simply stared, tears streaming down her face. Then slowly, she stepped inside. Every room was a revelation, each detail speaking directly to her heart. She ran her fingers over the smooth wooden countertops in the kitchen, admired the sunlight streaming through the bay window, and smiled at the sight of old family photos framed neatly on the walls. By the time they reached the backyard, where a small vegetable garden awaited planting, she was sobbing openly. "Karim," she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. This is more than I could have ever dreamed of." Karim held her close, his own eyes glistening with emotion. "You gave me a home when I had none," he said. "Now, let me give you one filled with love." That evening, as they sat together, on the porch watching the sunset, Margaret reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From that rainy night in the alleyway to this beautiful new chapter, their lives had been intertwined by fate and fortified by love. She looked at Karim, now a confident and compassionate man, and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. This house wasn't just a gift. It was proof that kindness, when nurtured, could grow into something extraordinary. And so as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Margaret leaned back in her chair, feeling truly at peace. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future free from worry, surrounded by beauty and love. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of what Karim had planned, a legacy of giving back that would ripple far beyond the walls of their new home. Margaret's new home quickly became more than just a place to live. It transformed into a hub of warmth, connection, and purpose. Neighbors, curious about the charming cottage nestled among the trees, began stopping by to introduce themselves. Margaret welcomed them with open arms, offering freshly baked cookies and stories of her journey with Karim. It wasn't long before word spread about the remarkable bond between the schoolteacher who had saved a refugee boy and the man who had built her a dream house in return. People were inspired by their story, and soon Margaret's home became a gathering spot for those seeking advice, encouragement, or simply a listening ear. Karim, too, continued to make waves in his field. His work designing sustainable housing solutions for displaced families earned him international recognition. He traveled frequently, speaking at conferences and collaborating with organizations around the world. But no matter where his career took him, he always made time to visit Margaret. Their weekends together became cherished rituals, cooking meals in the spacious kitchen, tending to the vegetable garden, or sitting on the porch sharing laughter and memories. The house Karim had built wasn't just a gift to Margaret. It was a testament to the enduring bond they shared, one that grew stronger with each passing year. What made this chapter of their lives truly extraordinary was how both Margaret and Karim used their experiences to inspire others. Margaret, now retired from teaching, found a renewed sense of purpose mentoring young people in her community. Many of them came from challenging backgrounds. Some were foster kids, like Karim had been, while others faced struggles ranging from poverty to broken homes. Margaret listened to their stories without judgment, offering wisdom gleaned from decades of compassion and resilience. She often told them about Karim, not as a tale of success, but as a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could change someone's life forever. Karim, meanwhile, expanded his mission beyond architecture. In addition to designing homes, he launched an initiative aimed at supporting refugees and displaced individuals as they rebuilt their lives. Through partnerships with local governments and nonprofits, he established programs that provided job, training, educational resources, and mental health support. One of his proudest achievements was a scholarship fund named after Margaret, the Margaret Harper Foundation for Resilience. The foundation offered financial assistance to students from underprivileged backgrounds, helping them pursue higher education and achieve their dreams. When Karim announced the creation of the fund during a gala event, he invited Margaret to join him on stage. As she stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, the audience erupted in applause, moved by the legacy of love and generosity they represented. Their story also gained attention beyond their immediate circle. Local newspapers wrote articles about them, highlighting their journey as a shining example of humanity's capacity for good. A filmmaker even approached them about creating a documentary based on their lives. At first, Margaret hesitated, unsure if she wanted to share such personal details with the world. But Karim convinced her, saying, If our story can inspire even one person to reach out and help someone else, isn't it worth it? Together they agreed to participate, hoping to amplify their message of hope and unity. The documentary premiered to widespread acclaim. Audiences were captivated by the raw honesty of Margaret and Kareem's relationship, their struggles, triumphs, and unwavering commitment to each other. Viewers saw themselves in their story, recognizing the power of kindness, perseverance, and second chances. Letters poured in from across the globe, thanking them for reminding people of what truly mattered in life. Teachers wrote about using the film in classrooms to spark discussions about empathy and service. Refugees shared how Kareem's achievements gave them hope for brighter futures. And countless strangers expressed gratitude for Margaret's example of selflessness, vowing to pay it forward in their own communities. Despite the accolades and attention, Margaret and Kareem remained humble. They didn't see themselves as heroes. They were simply two people who had chosen to walk through life together, supporting each other every step of the way. For Margaret, the joy came from seeing Kareem thrive and knowing that her actions had helped shape the incredible man he had become. For Kareem, it was the knowledge that he had been able to give back, not only to Margaret but to countless others who needed a helping hand. As the years went by, Margaret's garden flourished, much like the lives she and Kareem had touched. The vegetables she grew became ingredients for meals shared with friends, neighbors, and former students. The flowers attracted bees and butterflies, filling the air with a sweet fragrance that seemed to symbolize the beauty of their intertwined destinies. Kareem often joked that the garden was a metaphor for their journey. Something small and fragile had taken root, nurtured by love and care, until it blossomed into something breathtaking. One crisp winter morning, as snow blanketed the ground and the world felt quiet and still, Margaret sat by the window in her cozy living room wrapped in a blanket. Kareem had just returned from another trip abroad and was busy unpacking in the kitchen. She watched him move about, his tall frame silhouetted against the soft glow of the overhead light. Her heart swelled with gratitude, not just for the house he had built or the opportunities he had created, but for the simple fact that he existed. That rainy night so many years ago had set off a chain reaction neither of them could have predicted, weaving their lives together in ways that defied logic yet made perfect sense. "Kareem," she called out, her voice warm and steady. He poked, his head into the living room, eyebrows raised in question. "Yes? I was thinking," she said, smiling softly. "We should host a dinner party soon. Invite everyone we've met along the way. The neighbors, the kids I mentor, the families you've helped. Let's fill this house with laughter and love." Kareem grinned, nodding enthusiastically. "I think that sounds perfect." And so they did. The evening was magical. A tapestry of voices, stories, and cultures blending seamlessly under one roof. Laughter echoed through the halls, plates of food were passed around, and heartfelt conversations unfolded late into the night. As Margaret looked around at the faces gathered in her home, she realized something profound. Their journey wasn't just about the two of them anymore. It had grown into something larger, a ripple effect of kindness that continued to spread, touching lives far beyond what they could see. In the end, Margaret and Kareem's story wasn't just about rescue or repayment. It was about the transformative power of love and the boundless potential of human connection. What began as a chance encounter on a rainy night had blossomed into a lifetime of giving, growing, and inspiring others. Their legacy wasn't confined to walls or blueprints. It lived in the hearts of everyone whose lives they had touched, proof that even the smallest acts of compassion could create ripples that changed the world.